politicians really using hypnosis on us? It seems to have become kind of fashionable in the current climate of political fervour around the world, though particularly in the US and the UK, for hypnosis professionals and authors to write about how politicians are using mass hypnosis. In particular, there's a lot of material written about how Trump or Obama before him are apparently manipulating people during speeches and during big public addresses. So let's be honest, they're not. You know, if you go and Google the subject, you'll see that virtually all of these articles refer to the ways in which the politicians are using language. Particular language patterns are getting pointed out and highlighted. And they are mainly the sort of indirect Ericksonian language patterns, or those espoused by the field of NLP. And there's been disagreement over the extent to which Erickson's or the NLP approach can actually be compared to previous forms of hypnotism, or whether it might even be better called something else other than hypnotism, in order to avoid confusion. One of the key difficulties here is that indirect suggestions appear to function by means of a sort of fundamentally different mechanism from traditional hypnotic suggestion. So, for example, the prolific hypnosis researchers and academics Stephen J. Lin, Irving Kirsch, and Hultqvist define hypnotic suggestion in terms of, unlike placebos, misleading questions, and other forms of indirect suggestion, hypnotic suggestions are requests for imaginative experiences, and for that reason they can also be termed imaginative suggestions. That's back in 2008. But by that definition, much of Ericksonian or indirect language usage is clearly not employing hypnosis, and would perhaps be better being labelled indirect suggestion therapy. Now, many of the articles doing the round on the internet currently tend to confuse the public as well as hypnosis students, and tends to mislead them about the nature of hypnosis and its role in psychological therapy. It's often making claims that are completely inconsistent with research within our field. In these articles, it's often suggested that the politicians using these hypnotic language patterns are saying things that are beyond our conscious awareness, or circumventing resistance somehow. James Braid's original definition of hypnotism was in terms of focused attention, conscious attention on a particular idea or mental image, accompanied by the conscious expectation that some response would happen as a result. It was only later that certain authors were seeking to portray hypnotism in more obfuscating and mystifying terms, as something to do with talking to the unconscious mind of the client, for example. Consequently, sometimes more evidence-based practitioners are quite concerned that some hypnosis professionals and authors encourage a sort of magical thinking or surround themselves with mystique by suggesting that hypnosis can be used to manipulate the thoughts of the masses without them really knowing it. And this is the stance of some approaches to hypnotherapy, but not others. It was in particular a criticism that was levelled against Erickson by Theodore Barber, in the 60s and 70s. And in a symposium discussion of one of Erickson's papers summarising some aspects of hypnosis research, Barber said that it seemed that half of Dr. Erickson's presentation was from the position of a natural scientist, psychologist, and psychiatrist, really trying to understand what hypnosis is. But that the other half of the time, his presentation seemed to be from the position of someone of many years ago who really thought that hypnosis was a mysterious, magical thing. That the subject goes into a trance. When he's in a trance, magic-like things happen. And Barber said that it's implied in Erickson's work that a kind of mysterious thing happens because of the trance. So this this notion, it's important what Barber said, because it highlights very clearly the fundamental difference in outlook between this sort of Ericksonian tradition in hypnotism and perhaps the socio-cognitive theory represented by Barber, which is probably considered more common sense and skeptical cognitive behavioral or socio-cognitive perspective, which is fairly dominant in the current research literature. Although many hypnotherapists are still drawn to Ericksonian approaches, despite the lack of evidence to support it, it fascinates, it intrigues, and it suggests that hypnotic suggestions and changes can then be made by wielding language in a particular way. And article authors suggesting that politicians have learned how to use these mysterious hypnotic communication tools to influence voters and the public. Suggestion can indeed create change without hypnosis. Everything that can be done with hypnosis can also be done without hypnosis. But if it's just suggestion, why state that people are being hypnotized? You see, evidence suggests that, hypnosis is collaborative. It requires the recipient or the subject to engage in it, not just be a passive recipient of it. It's not something that just gets wielded upon people. You're not shazamming people. Hilgard said in the 60s, that hypnosis depends more on the efforts and abilities of the subject than on the skill of the hypnotist. That's still pretty true today. I've got a book of classic and brilliant speeches from throughout history. And when you pick away at the transcripts, you can see that a number of language patterns could be highlighted, in numerous sections. But that said, the field of NLP had not even been created at the time of many of those speeches. Remember, NLP does tend to model what others do well. Politicians, of course, continue to invest money in delivering their messages in the hope and with the aim that we, the electorate, absorb the information and subsequently have our allegiance influenced. They want us to accept their message rather than others and, to make a vote for them instead of their rivals. They want us to feel like life is going to be better if we vote for them. They want their message to appear more attractive, and so on and so on, Political messages and political rhetoric, it's everywhere. They're everywhere and anywhere, in fact. And are they actually anything to do with hypnosis, as numerous authors suggest? It's clear for anyone to see that, politicians do utilize a range of suggested techniques to attempt to influence you, suggestive techniques. And on occasions, politicians employ techniques whereby they want you to identify with their values, their message, and suggest that you and your loved ones will be better off as a result of them running things, for example. And these politicians will even tell you, what a brilliant, informed, and intelligent choice you made by choosing them. They may remind you of how wise you are for having made this choice and how better your life and the life of your family will be now that you choose them. They may attempt to make you feel better informed, make you feel clever, make you feel enlightened or responsible, or whatever it takes for you to plant your flag in the ground beside them. The reason I'm saying this, the point that I'm making here is that many people do draw parallels with the field of hypnosis because politicians, use words and images in a way that's intended to influence your behavior and to influence the way that you vote. It's therefore not surprising at all that many people consider political speeches as mass hypnosis. We can see that within political speeches, suggestions are delivered. In hypnosis, we often consider our clients to be suggestible, of course. Suggestibility can be seen as an ability to welcome new ideas, being prepared to learn new things, take on other perspectives, for example. So then, as we take on new information, new ideas, new perspectives, depending on its relevancy and beneficial value to the individual, it may well affect a person's experience anywhere from a little to a lot. In a hypnotherapy session, the client is being, the client is the person being influenced and is therefore in some sense also suggestible. Of course, they've chosen to be there in some way and are therefore open to making changes. They want to obtain new perspectives and have their experience affected in ways that are going to help them enjoy their life more or cope with life better in some way. If we look at the work of Theodore Barber in the late 60s, you'll know that very few adults ever accept information without appraising it in some shape or form. So there's a great big difference between suggestibility and gullibility. Hypnosis does not render people gullible. Is the same sort of suggestibility present when we're subjected to political speeches that are delivered by prominent politicians? And I don't really think so. We're open to new experience, or we may dig our heels in, defend our other choices in opposition to the politician, for example. And though that can happen in therapy too, of course there's a difference. There are indeed a number of parallels between how some schools of hypnosis explain hypnosis and some of the ways in which politicians deliver their messages. But politicians, they're not using hypnosis per se. Many even believe that unless a formal and consensual induction has taken place, hypnosis has not occurred. Some believe that unless there is understanding and agreement, hypnosis has not occurred. Okay, so we might use certain terms related to hypnosis to describe the effects of political speeches from time to time. But when you look closer, you see how easy it is to distinguish one from the other. You really can. If you really want to examine how and why people vote for the politicians that they do, then go and examine and explore what the sort of psychological or political psychological science research suggests, rather than believing it's because of hypnosis being used. So, for example, in a paper entitled "The Psychology of Voting" by John Krosnich, professor of psychology and political science at Ohio State University, he shows that the single most powerful predictor of a person's vote choice is his or her political party identification. Second, he suggests, and research has shown that voters' perceptions of candidates' personalities, their intelligence, their knowledge, their trustworthiness, their ability to be a strong leader, that also predicts, some people's votes very well. And people's assessments of the health of the country predict other people's votes. His research adds that there are other interesting findings that people don't treat good and bad information about a candidate equally. If a little creature is to survive in the forest, it must optimistically look everywhere and anywhere for food. But it's also got to be hyper-vigilant for any signs of danger, so that it can make a quick escape when and or if necessary. In a similar way, voters are especially attuned to unfavourable information about political candidates. Learning one bad thing about a candidate does much more damage to the candidate's image than learning one good thing helps. So it's no surprise that we see so much negative advertising, so much negative rhetoric these days. £1 spent criticising your opponent will help you much more than £1 spent spreading the word of your own good qualities. Go and explore. You'll find some insight that's definitely just as fascinating as this fantasy that politicians are wielding hypnosis upon the masses. Do subscribe to this channel to get all my latest videos first. Go visit my college website for more information about our online and classroom-based hypnosis and hypnotherapy training courses. That's it for today. Goodbye for now. Toodaloo.